If you don't have the social skills, the people skills, it's more difficult to get ahead. Everything that you do requires other people to help you reach your goals. Or even if you're like the lone wolf, let's say you're an artist and you create an amazing painting, well, somebody still needs to have a building to hang it in. We don't live in a disconnected world. We live in a very interconnected world. But the issue is a lot of us are not connected to that world at all. And you often hear people say, I'm no good with small talk. Generally, that's because they're stuck in phatic speech cycle, PHATIC. So phatic speech is just boring day-to-day chit-chat that we have. Oh, weather's looking kind of cold today. Yeah, should improve by tomorrow. That's not inspired conversation. The exchanging of information is dry, but we are emotional creatures. So if we can share emotions with one another, we're different from every other person in the world. Emotions are addictive. What emotions are you sharing with somebody? Have you shared 3 emotions with them? 5 emotions? How deep are you sharing those emotions? How long have you shared those emotions for? Like, we've all met somebody who just has like one emotion. Maybe they are super excited, but they kind of become annoying to be around. So as soon as I started to take risk and have more fun, I had the attitude of, I wonder what would happen if I said this. A good exercise is, can you get a free coffee in a coffee shop? Because once you start taking risks, you start breaking boring conversational patterns. That's something I do a lot. The server comes to take my plate away. They lean to take the plate away. I might just tap their hand. No. And they're like, what? But that creates a completely different kind of conversation. My gift to him was being willing to be rejected. That's the risk, right? But I'm doing that for him. So now he gets to chat to someone, have a really interesting day. Right? There's people who are less bright than you. There's morons out there who've got this stuff down. So, yeah, it's one of them. If they can do it, you can do it. I want to know what to say to make somebody laugh. That's like a classic question. And the reason is get a taste of power. If you can make somebody laugh on cue, that's exciting. So the beginner mindset of learning will want that. But the mastery level.
So, Marcus, welcome back to the show. You are, as we already know, a charisma coach, and I think the best in the world. So, what's your mindset when you go out with people and you're being very charismatic?
Okay, so I guess as a recap, where I come in and where I help people is, how do you improve your social skills so you can create networks and open doors and change your life? Because if you don't have the social skills, the people skills, uh, it's more difficult to get ahead. There's a big game being played around us, and if you don't know how that game works, then you're at a disadvantage. So what I was very curious to do is to learn what are the rules of that game and how do we make the game better for ourselves. So that could be the people we meet along the way, as I said, the opportunities that it creates. Because if you think about it, in life, nothing good is built alone. Everything that you do requires other people to help you reach your goals. Or even if you're like somebody who's like just a lone wolf who likes to do things alone, like let's say you're an artist and you create an amazing painting, well, somebody still needs to put it in a frame. Someone needs to drill a hole and stick a nail in the wall so you can hang it. Someone needs to have a building to hang it in. So we don't live in a disconnected world. We live in a very interconnected world. But the issue is a lot of us are not connected to that world at all. So where I come in is I help people improve their connection skills, as it were. So I don't think I answered your question, but I just wanted to just lay down a basic foundation of where I come from. Because I found the value of like just talking to people just creates great things in your life. I went to a restaurant 2 days ago, and in fact I did went two nights in a row, because when we were there, the person who was our server was just like, I'm going to give you 50% off your meal. Like, and I was like, oh, why? Why are you doing that? And they're just like, oh, well, we had this offer, we had these little tokens that never got used, so you guys have them. And I said, oh, thanks so much. And they're like, come back tomorrow if you want. So we did, and yeah, like it's just little things like that that
But
add a bit of sparkle.
but but you gave him like a laugh potion, or how did you? What
Uh,
did you do to him?
well, that's a great question. What what most people do when they have conversations is they share data, they share information. How are you? Good. How are you? What have you been up to recently? I've been up to this, and it's very dry. Uh, the exchanging of information is dry, but we are emotional creatures. So if we can share emotions with one another, we can make somebody feel an emotion. We're different from every other person in the world, or every other person they meet that day, at least. So what I did is I there was a girl who was working on the bar. Just made her laugh, just had a chat with her, just uh, doing those things, but doing it in a way that made that person feel emotion. That's what separated me from every other person that had probably gone in there that day. Good emotions as well.
Mm.
Bad emotions, negative emotions are also there is a value to them, but that's a bit more advanced.
There's a value to negative emotions?
Yeah, we'll go down that rabbit hole. So if you think about it, the people you connect most deeply with are the people you've shared the most amount of emotions with. So if you just share really happy emotions with somebody, which is great, um, you'll have a certain level of connection with them, a certain depth to your certain quality to your connection. But if you've like gone through thick and thin with them, if you've had the stress of overcoming a challenge, like if it's exaggerated, but let's say you climb a mountain together, there's parts of that journey you'll be tired. There's parts where you're cold. Are you going to reach the top? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And then whatever happens, you have a great story from that experience. It had highs, it had lows. So the lows are actually part of the spectrum of emotion. The problem is most people get stuck in the low emotions because emotions are addictive, and negative emotions are more addictive than positive emotions, which is nuts, but that's just how we're wired. So it takes effort to get positive. We don't do anything. We just end up comfortable, and then we end up negative. So negative emotions are valuable, and they widen the spectrum that we can share with somebody. But we don't want to obviously spend too long in there because that's what everyone else does. But they spend it in a very narrow bandwidth of emotion, very negative, and that's when you end up having your energy sapped by somebody.
So, but basically, what you're saying is you have the conscious skill to go into someone that you don't really know, and you can make them feel a range of emotions, be it positive or negative, and you can like command
Monkey
them,
around.
like
Yeah, yeah. We all have this ability. Uh, it's just something I spent some time developing because I wasn't very good at it. I noticed there was a friend of mine who's an accountant who was like, that's the most kind of dull job you can imagine. But he was super charismatic. Like people loved him because what he did is he would bounce around all the different emotions when he was chatting with somebody. So to give you an example of that, uh, one way you could do it just very simply is if you said to somebody, "Oh, the meal I had was fantastic," that might make them feel positive emotion. If you say it and you actually believe it, like if you say, "Oh, the meal I had was fantastic," then your face will start to change to resemble the emotions you're expressing. But if we wanted to
mhm.
put like a little bit of negative in there, we could say, "Hey, you know, don't don't take this the wrong way. Uh, but the meal was amazing," and we've added a bit of tension and we've released that tension, and that creates a spike of emotion because it's like, oh, relief and ah. So we all have this ability. It's just if you're consciously aware of it, then you could start playing around with it.
So now you brought me already to my next question. So I've seen you in London. I've taken a live course because I think it's amazing what you do. Just background for people that they know what's our situation. So there you introduced a lot of comedy and fun and games. When did you start to incorporate comedy in such a it felt like very powerful and like very like central theme of your philosophy?
Mm. Well, most social interactions follow a pattern, like a pattern behavior. And there's actually a term for it. It's called phatic speech, Phatic. So phatic speech is just boring day-to-day chit chat that we have. And you often hear people say, "Oh, I'm no good with small talk." Generally, that's because they're stuck in phatic speech cycles of just oh, weather's looking kind of cold today. Yeah, should improve by tomorrow. Just like it's boring because that's not inspired conversation. It's not something that's raw and real. It's something that they've said before. So in answer to how I got more like that, I wasn't born like that. I had to learn it. But what I started to realize is a lot of conversations are very boring. So as soon as I started to take risk and have more fun, just to see what would happen. So I had the attitude of, I wonder what would happen if I said this, and being okay with whatever the result was. Because once you start taking risks, you start breaking boring conversational patterns. Then fun starts happening, like shock, surprise. So I was at a famous venue in Los Angeles called the Magic Castle, which is where all these magicians hang out. And I walked in and I didn't bring my ID, so I couldn't get in. I had to convince the door guy, the bouncer, to let me in. Just as I was doing that, this old comedian guy walks in, and the door staff said to him, "Hey, how are you?" Like phallic speech. And he's like, the guy replies, "What the hell do you want to know for?" Which was like a shock. And the bouncer laughed. And I was like, "Oh wow, there's something cool in that." Then I remember like a few months later, I was in an airport and I was trying to get into the lounge for free, but and the guy ahead of me, there was
Mm.
two like the door staff there, two maitre d's or whatever, not maitre d', basically the waiter was on the door, and he walks in and he goes, "How are you today?" So he used phallic speech. He's like, "How are you today?" And they went, "Yeah, we're good." And he went, "Thank God! Oh, thank God!" And I remember like that was so funny. Like it was such a surprise. Like it was just weird. Like it was unpredictable. So as soon as I started doing more unpredictable stuff, I started building the attitude that would allow humor to come in. So it's not about clever lines, right? That's part of it. That's technique, but really it's about your attitude in everything you do with self-improvement, self-development. What attitude are you developing for yourself? So one of the most powerful attitudes is to take risks, to be curious, what will happen if I do this? And to be relaxed with whatever result that happens is just data. It's just information you can use. So those are three very important components for developing that area of your life to become less structured and more ah we can combine those three things into an even more powerful exercise for ourselves, or view of moving through life, which is called play. Like play is how we learn as humans, quick, super quick. When we play around, when things get serious, that's when it all gets like not fun. But play is just like being experimental, trying things out. So that's the attitude to foster. Just, I wonder if I say this thing to this person, how they react. What will they respond like? Sometimes you'll be right, and a lot of the time you'll be wrong, and you'll be like, "Oh, that was a surprise." So that's something I do a lot. Like the server comes to take my plate away, and as they lean to take the plate away, I might just tap their hand. Now, like I just want to see what they do. And they're like, "What?" But that creates a completely different kind of conversation than they would have had all day. So that's how you become memorable.
Mm. Ah, you're becoming memorable. I see. Like that's also a thing, no? If you go to an event and maybe you come back to the same event next year and no one remembers you.
Yeah, that happens. That's nice as well sometimes to be ambiguous. But yeah, the more you make yourself a story in someone else's story, that's how you become remembered. So what I mean by that is when you have an interaction with that person, will they go home and tell their partner about you? Will they go and say, "Oh, guess what happened to me today?" Or, "Oh, this person came in the other week." Once that happens, you're then part of their story, and that's how you get remembered,
Mm.
especially if you shared
And is
emotions with
this
them.
and is this how you create value for someone in a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, the idea of value is like, are you putting rabbits in hats for people? To use a magician analogy. But if you're leaving somebody better off than you found them, then you're adding value to them, right? If you're being memorable, you're adding value. What was really surprising to me, it still surprises me now. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years. But what I find really surprising is you don't have to be that amazing. You don't have to do something so crazy to be memorable. Just even having what could be called boring chit chat will still make you stand out because no one talks to anyone. Like people just sit in silence. They have their own little pockets and groups they know. But if you just walk up to another group and say, "Hi, how's it going?" Like it doesn't have to be amazing. That's still memorable because no one does it. Like we live in such a isolated world now that even just doing anything is kind of memorable because no one wants to take the risk.
But how do you deal then with rejection? Because now you shared at your live event that you don't feel so much of like the what's internally happening for us, like we're afraid that our body gets nervous. But like how do people deal with it usually? Because it's not a comfortable feeling.
Yeah, yeah. It's not. No one likes that feeling of rejection. Um, so there's a few things. I remember like trying to work out how do you get over that feeling. So the feeling never changes, right? But you change. So one of the things is start seeing it as data, not as like a judgment on your value as a person. Like how somebody responds to you could be up to a number of different things. They could have had a really bad day. They could be tired. They might not have the resources to talk to you at that moment. They might not even speak the same language as you. They may have their mind on other things. Like there's so many reasons you could get a certain response. So none of them have anything to do with you. So that's the first thing. The second thing is rejection exists if you believe it exists. So rather than me thinking uh, conversation went well or it went bad, I think it went well or it was funny. I only look for those one of those two outcomes. If I'm looking for one of those two outcomes, I always find it. If I'm always looking for rejection, I'll always find it. So why would I look for rejection? The only reason I would look for rejection is to reinforce low self-esteem. To basically make my life very difficult. Like if I walk into a room and I'm looking for something that's not tidy, I'll find it. You know, if I take a white glove, I'll find dust somewhere. Like you will find what you look for. So the problem the problem we make is we think we're not good enough because we don't think we're good enough in life. We look for rejection as confirmation. So don't stop it. Look for reasons why you're awesome. So what I do is I focus on taking action. So taking action means doing, here's what I'm doing now. Taking action means getting up and doing it. That's my proof for being awesome. I'm not looking proof. I'm not looking for proof that I've screwed up in some way. So when I started doing that, rejection became irrelevant. Now, weirdly, I do like the feeling because if there's something that makes me feel like, oh my God, that's alive, that's exciting now. So I actually look for places where the risk is palpable, where there is a feeling of what could happen, because I know that's going to be me at my most authentic. That's a different relationship to that concept of not being liked. So the more we need to be liked by others is a reflection of, or is kind of in proportion to how much we like ourselves. We like ourselves a lot. We don't need to be liked by others. We like ourselves not very much. We need to be liked by others because there needs to be a feeling for us for validation. So the way to get out of seeking validation is something we covered on the training. Is remember to pat your back all the time. Everything you do, well done, well done, well done. So that's something I do all the time. Just many conversations I have, I start the conversation. The person looks at me like that kind of face. I know
Yeah.
that's just data, but I also know if I carry on talking for the next 20 seconds, that face will change. But a lot of people don't know that. They'll just go, "Oh shit, I've screwed up. I've got to get out of there." But no, you're doing fine. This face, that's a normal reaction, but it keeps us all frozen. So yeah, on the training, there was a guy at bus stop I just started chatting to, and I think the thing I said to him was we had to pick a line, just a random thing to say to somebody, and I said, I really like the character Dhalsim from Street Fighter 2. It's my favorite character. That was it. I said that just, and he just looked at me like, what? And I said, and I knew he was going to do that face because I've got the experience. I've already done that kind of thing lots of times. So I knew just relax because he's going to respond to my reaction. And if my reaction's relaxed, he'll start relaxing. So as he
That
was like trying to figure me out and I'm just chill, I said, so you didn't tell me what your favorite character was. And he's like, well, I didn't actually play video games that much. And he started chatting and it didn't make any sense, that conversation, because it's not logical, it's just spontaneous. But we had a great chat. He's like, thank you. He goes, oh my God, he goes, I stand by this bus stop every day. This is the most interesting day I've had. And I was like, that's awesome. Because we took a risk. So my gift to him was being willing to be rejected. That's the risk, right? But I'm doing that for him. So now he gets to chat to someone, have a really interesting day. But it happened because I took the risk. But if he'd gone like, what are you talking about, mate? Get out of here. I'm like, okay. I don't make that now part of my story that I'm going to take. That time the guy at the bus stop didn't know if he could play his Dowsing. Oh, God. It's not. It's just funny. It's like, oh, well.
And you also shared a story in a group that someone offered you 1,000 something pounds and free coffee. Was that like Was it a real story or was it something you made up?
No, that was real. Uh, that's funny because yeah, so we have a private group, which I share secret stuff in, but not so secret now. Um, yeah, so what I always think a good exercise is, can you get a free coffee in a coffee shop? So I had like the best experience of that ever, because walked in, chatting to the guy behind the bar, and got two free coffees actually. And I was like, brilliant. And he's like, do you want a bagel or whatever it was? I was like, yeah, okay, thanks. So I got two coffees and a cake, but they're great. Um, Now that guy, I've seen him before. Like, I've gone in there, said hi to him before. So wasn't too crazy, but it's awesome. And there was a guy sitting on my right, and I was just chatting to him. It's like, oh, how's it going? And he's like, oh, I guess I've got this job I hate at the moment. Like this company, I don't enjoy working with them. And I was like, oh no. He goes, so what do you do anyway? He goes, I don't like my job. What do you do? And I told him. He goes, oh my god. He goes, would you like to come in? He goes, I've got this massive company budget. Would you like to come into my company and do some training with me? Because I have this budget to spend. And I was like, sure. so so that was like, yeah, it's thousand pounds as well. So I was like, that's, how good's that? Coffee, donut, or whatever, and a grand in your back pocket. But that's an example of what just being, it's not about creating these flamboyant, crazy experiences for people. It's just about pushing one step beyond your comfort zone, maybe two steps. Just have that little bit of chit chat. In fact, the guy who was sitting down, I think I probably said to him something like, "You look very comfortable there." That was it. But notice my voice as I said that. I didn't just go, "You look very comfortable there." It's like, "You look very comfortable there." So that was it. That was enough to create some sort of novel moment and for us to start talking.
But what are you doing with your voice? What are you doing with your voice?
What am I doing with my voice? Playing.
Hey guys, so in this moment our interview connection got cut off and we continued with me asking Marcus what he would do if someone actually came to him to get charisma coaching, and you'll hear his answer right now.
So usually what the problem is there's no story linked around what they're talking about. There's a context missing that brings all their data to life. So yeah, stories are super important.
And what I also heard from your answer is you even would tell someone to scale back their body language, maybe?
Somebody already, like, if it's all about building a balance, right? So if somebody's constantly using very big body language, the impact of that dwindles over time. It just decreases because it's their constant. So when somebody's got very big body language, I want to see what they're like with very small body language. Somebody's very small body language and they don't like being on stage, then let's see what they're like with very big body language. So what we look at, for example, is what their body language is doing, what their tonality is doing, what their story is doing. Do they tell one big story? Do they use lots of short little stories? So it's about having this range in what their existing skill set is. So that's probably when you'd want somebody who's very loud to be more quiet. Doesn't happen often though.
Yeah, I have to say, actually, like your whole curriculum of what you teach, it seems to be quite expansive, actually. Many
Yeah.
little details.
Technique. What do you say to somebody? How do you start a conversation? The level of technique is like a more granular level of learning, and techniques are great, but techniques become patterns in themselves. They're just training wheels. The deeper levels of learning, the higher levels of learning, are learning attitude. Because if you have the right attitude in anything, if you're playing golf or you're a hypnotherapist or whatever you're doing, you're a bricklayer. If your attitude is on point, you'll become your own best teacher anyway. You'll learn all the uh, smaller behaviors that other people teach. You'll start innovating as well. So for me, the most exciting learning happens when you teach how to change someone's attitude. The problem is most people don't want to learn how to change their attitude. They want the technique. Oh yes, but what do I say? But what if it didn't matter what you said? Yeah, it doesn't sound as cool. I want to know what to say to make somebody laugh. That's like a classic beginner question. And the reason is there's power there. You get a taste of power. If you can make somebody laugh, on cue. That's exciting. So the beginner mindset of learning will want that. But the mastery level is more just, it doesn't become an issue anymore. It becomes irrelevant because the attitude has changed. The attitude that created the problem, you can spend all your time finding techniques within that attitude that created the problem. But the end journey is still the same. Your attitude will change over time, and then it won't be a problem anymore. So once in a while, I'll meet a student who's like, they want to learn how to change their attitude, not the techniques. The techniques just become a byproduct. They're ultimately they're irrelevant because true mastery is you create your own techniques anyway. So it's how, for example, you can say to somebody, "Hey, do you want to punch in the face?" And they'll laugh, but a student does that, and then the person gets really angry. What's different? It's the attitude in the person saying it. I wouldn't say that that's that's a good exercise to practice necessarily. There's salespeople I know who they get on the phone and they just tell the person on the other end of the phone what a piece of shit they are. They're the worst they like, and the other person's laughing their head off because it's so audacious. But if somebody else picked up the phone and did that, they'd lose the contract. Like they're out of there. So what's the difference between the two? The difference is mindset. Where's the mindset come from? Mindset is created by your attitude. So if you can, anything you want to get good at, if you can focus on what is the winning attitude of that thing, that's the fastest way to learn. But the block we have in doing that is it means we change. We, as a person, the ego of me, dies and becomes another thing. Like Doctor Who, you go through a different regeneration into something else. And generally, the ego mind doesn't want that. It wants to stay as it is with these extra super skills. So if you had the power of Superman, you'd be Superman. You wouldn't be you anymore. That's cool, but no one wants to die to become Superman, metaphorically die. So that's why most people just they stay in their comfort zone with that kind of stuff because attitude means rewiring you as a person, and that's a big deal for a lot of people.
Yeah, but I'm wondering why, because it's also, I think it's also like a natural process over your life that you make new experiences, you see new things, you try out new things, hopefully.
It
And
is. The issue is a
how
lot of
would
people
you instigate a attitude change in someone?
take them out into the snow and steal their clothes. That change your attitude pretty quick. But no, in answer to your question, uh, it is the human condition to want to improve and refine yourself, but a lot of people don't have that opportunity. Maybe they're working a 9 till 5, they come home tired, and they have no free time to carve out for that, or they're raising a family, or they're caught up in the day-to-day living of life. So that's what causes, I think, a lot of pain is we lose that desire to do that, or we don't have the opportunity, or we don't carve out the time, even like say 30 minutes a day, just to that time is just for you to innovate and to try stuff out. But in answer to your question, how do you create a new attitude? This is a program I'm actually looking at creating in the next maybe 12 months, 24 months, because I don't think anyone's really answered that question to a level that I find satisfactory, which is like, what is the inner game of rewiring your mind? So some clues are your ability to project what's inside you outside of you would be one factor. So if you have the attitude of like, I have like, here's a good attitude, like can do attitude. Hey, let's solve this problem. Let's do it. You can have that internally, but you've got to be able to put it outside of you as well, in the external world, where it could come up against opposition, resistance. So being willing to push your attitude outwards is a way to actually reinforce it in you as well. If your attitude, you'll see like people in January want to get all like fit because it's New Year, so they go and exercise. So they have the attitude to change themselves internally. Then they go out into the world and put it into practice. And some of them stick at it, and some of them don't. Why is that? So it's your attitude is really your filtering mechanism for how you move through reality and how you change your attitude. Another clue is what values do you prize in your life? Do you prize compassion over, say, temperance? Do you prize patience over strength? You don't, or do you prize strength and patience? Like, so the qualities of a human, there are many qualities you can have. What are your qualities? Get clear on them and think about how you project those qualities out. So the qualities would be, for example, this is something from one of the YCC trainers, a guy called JD Dupree, who's a genius, realized that basically the human character is made up of virtues. So the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece realized that you can only boil down the human condition into so many components, so many traits, and this is what they called the virtues. So, what virtues, what values do you live by? Some of them you probably are, you realize you have. Some of them you're like, oh yeah, I am, I do that, but you haven't really thought about it. So it's bringing them all to your attention, getting clarity on them, and moving through life with them. That's one way to rewire your attitude. A shortcut way is find people who have the attitude you want and hang around with them. And it just rub off. Like that's the quick and dirty way. So that saying, you end up like the 5 or 6 people you hang around with. Well, a lot of what I learned came from hanging around charismatic people, but they couldn't explain what they were doing. The only difference was I was like, why does that work? That was the question I was always asking myself. I was curious. They didn't have curiosity. They were just projecting. I was like, why is that working? What did they do then? Because you're hanging around other people, you're hanging around their filtering systems. So you start seeing reality through their lens. And then eventually your mind, your unconscious mind will just catch up with it. And how you get good then, well, why is that happening? That's how you sort of go up a level. The really interesting people with the attitude you want aren't in your town. They're not in your street.
Which town do they live?
They all live in the next road over. So what I mean is, yeah, you might bump into the odd person, but you've got to get out. Got to go and do things you wouldn't normally do. Like the person who's got an amazing attitude might be a tennis coach. You don't even play tennis. You've never played it. You have no desire to. But one day somebody says, do you want to go play tennis? You're like, all right. Like I took up a bricklaying course 6 weeks ago because I want to learn how to build a wall. And when I was there, the teacher who taught that course was brilliant. He had an amazing attitude. He was so chill. I learned so much from him about teaching. He was just, working in a small classroom, just 9 people in it. This is how you build a wall. But I learnt more than bricklaying from him. I don't want to be a bricklayer, but I just was curious about that. What is that process like? So I went and did something that I wouldn't do. Like I had the attitude of being contrary, just thinking like, oh, I have no interest in that, therefore I will go and study it, which seems counterintuitive. But I get a lot of learning out of doing things that I'm not drawn to. So there's another clue in that.
For me, it's often that I'm very judgmental about some things, like trendy things. So I like resist a lot. But then eventually it can happen that I'm like become the biggest champion of it. These glasses, for example, like a few months ago, I was like, oh my God, how can people wear this shit? It looks super stupid. But then I'm like, oh my God, that's it. As you say. So I think for me, this is also a navigational system in my life that I've observed a few times. Like, oh, things I'm very judgmental about could hold a clue for me in some way.
Yeah, I haven't gone into it too deeply, but there's a whole concept of your shadow self, which I think a lot of people get very like, ooh, shadow. But really, I just look at it as it's the stuff behind you that you're not aware of, but is part of you. So the what you don't know. So generally when there's stuff in there, like, oh, like I have no desire to be on TikTok, right? But there's probably something in there I'd learn if I did.
I had a question to you about TikTok.
Uh-oh.
Because I see many accounts, young guys usually, who have these like prank accounts. They do something, they would be in the supermarket and they would take out items from your shopping cart. But I'm wondering, like, okay, where's the fine line between doing like a prank, that like lightens the mood of the people, but when it's like, going too far and like the people that are involuntarily involved in your prank, that you piss them off or traumatize them or
Well, I used to do a lot of that stuff myself actually before TikTok, just to see what I could get away with. So that was an extreme of what I was doing.
Hey! 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 You bit me!
I know, but you've been bit by a famous guy. Isn't that crazy? What I learned from that is really the great skill is calibration, is what's the least amount of effort it takes to create a result that you want. And that goes for talking to people, doing a prank, whatever. So there is value in it for learning, like, oh, actually, you can get away with these things. Or, oh, I went a bit too far that time. But in answer to your question, how you avoid that is you ask yourself, who am I doing this for? Am I doing it for them or am I doing it for me? And generally, the people who are doing it that are pissing people off are doing it for them. They're doing it for themselves. They're not doing it to lift the other person up. They're doing it for their own reasons. But I don't mean selfish in a bad way. I just mean it's more about them creating their own story. Hey, I did this funny thing today, and these people got pissed off or whatever, or these people went mental. That's because they're writing their own story with the experience. But what if for me, what magic is can you leave these people better off than you find them? Can you give them a good story? I bite myself sometimes. And you do mathematics, geography, literature. You go through them all. Psychology.
Trying to guess where I'm from. Let's see if you're. Oh, you will never guess where she's from.
Okay, so, say a sentence.
My name is Maria Teresa.
Maria Teresa. I reckon you're from Nicaragua. Here's why. Because you said.
No, we told.
So that's basically how you avoid it. You ask yourself at a level of attitude, what kind of experience am I creating? Is it one for me, one for them? Is it for both of us? How do I leave them better off? That will change how far you push the prank as well.
Yeah, also a realization that I had when I was at a fair or whatever, and I was talking to many people just to keep in the flow after your event. But I realized when you look around us and you imagine we're like all these fish swimming in the ocean. So it's like we and the other people are kind of like a biosphere. And if you're a person that talks to other people and that if you express yourself in a spontaneous way, you're kind of helping the flow of the biosphere, or you're like an enzyme that helps, your body to digest food.
Yeah, if you go first, you change the social expectations of those around you. Like you've gone first, you started talking to people, so it makes it all right for everyone else to do it. You're like the first mouse that's gone on the mousetrap to get the cheese. There's the saying, the second mouse gets the cheese, right? But being the first mouse, that's like the hero. That you're like making the sacrifice. You're going around saying hi to people. Some of them are like having a great time. Some of them are like, who's this guy? But everyone on the edge is looking at you, go like, wow, you're making it okay. It's like the first dancer on the dance floor. If you're the first person dancing, no one wants to be the first dancer. But if you do it and you have more fun than everyone else, then you give the gift that everyone else can now join the dance floor. So that's being a badass. That's great. Being the enzyme, turn people to goo. Just make people melt.
Okay. Let's transition to the last part of this conversation.
Okay. Transition.
You mentioned that you don't like creating content, if I understood correctly. What do you not like about it?
Literally here creating content. I think it's more a semantics thing where everyone's doing that now. Everyone's creating content. Like for me, it's not getting wrapped up in soulless creation to get clicks or views. Like me personally, my attitude is I want to create lessons. I want to create learning and insight. You could label that as content, but I don't want every whole theme online of like just putting stuff out, putting garbage out, putting trash out. That's for me what content is. For me, what I say, I want to be more thoughtful. It's probably me just being a prima donna, but it's this idea of like, if you go online, like you have marketers, you gotta put good content out. It's like, oh, I don't want to belong to that. It doesn't resonate with me. So when my team are like talking about, hey, we've got to put some content out, I'm like, no, content, put lessons out, be meticulous, think about what you're putting, think about what you're sharing. You're just putting content out. Content's two-dimensional for me. It's soulless, it's dry. It's just like throwaway. It's not profound. So it's a quality thing. So my YouTube channel is a lazy YouTube channel. It probably gets one video update a year, but we're consistent once a year. But we don't put content out. We put stuff out when we feel like putting it out. It's trying to be more like Daniel Day-Lewis, where he would just like he reads loads of scripts and he picks like one and does something with that, rather than just, you got to put new stuff out every week, because the quality drops. It'd be shit. So that's why we don't do it.
But did you have the last time we talked? It was 5 years ago already. Do you still like develop new ideas, insights?
Yes, it's kind of interesting because the more I teach, the more I realize its basic principles are the most important building blocks. So a lot of our videos, we come back to the same topics because they're the things that get results. But yes, I do innovate. The level of innovation I focus on now is not beginner though. So most students will always be a beginner. Like if you go to a boxing club, you'll have 90% of the room will be beginner class. There's not an advanced boxing class usually. Or if there is, there's like one session where you got like 8 sessions of beginner classes. Because it's like a pyramid. Because most people, they just want the 80% push. They want to get better than what they're at now, but they don't necessarily need to be super advanced with it. So most innovation for me is now at the level of just like more advanced stage. So what do I mean by that? Well, innovation to me looks like talk to somebody without talking to them. Like, how long can you hold silence in a conversation? Can you set an intention and have a great conversation just from intention alone? Like if you give that to a beginner, they're not gonna have necessarily great success with it because they've got to get the basics in place first. So yes, I do still innovate, but it's more less at the beginner level now.
And what do you think of other charisma coaches or programs out there in the world?
Well, I think they all the ones I've seen seem to provide some principles. I haven't seen any that really provide the whole macro framework of everything. I'm going to be biased and say ours is the best. But I guess because I'm trying to answer this honestly, like, what do I think? I generally don't review many other social coaches' content, and that's not from being like, oh, I'm not going to read their books and things. It's not that. It's just I've got my model of how the world works, and so they're coming at it from their model of how the world works, and some models overlap, and that's exciting when that happens. But often their model may not click in with my model, for example, in my own mental model of how I view stuff. So for me, my macro model of charisma is your ability to evoke emotions in others whilst making them feel safe as you do that. So that's generally how I view all of it. And really, what is charisma? It's being completely unstifled, allowing your true self to come out. So the answer is just be yourself. Ugh. And so various people, yeah, they teach technique, for example, but does that technique help somebody to be themselves? Maybe the client or the student doesn't need that. Maybe they don't need to be themselves just yet. Maybe they need to try on different hats and see where they're at. So maybe that different training is going to be better for that. So yeah, I'm always interested to, like, bizarrely, another charisma coach who lives in my hometown, like just a mile from my house. We're friends. We chat about stuff, but I don't like. He doesn't go into my content. My curriculum. I don't really sort of follow his curriculum, but we get on really well. Yeah, I guess in that respect, an attitude I adopted very early on, which was lucky. I was lucky to is what can I learn from the person in front of me? So there's something I can learn from every single person. All the teacher really does is collect loads of lessons and put them in one area, in one place. But every person has a lesson they can teach you. And usually when you're feeling resistant from you, like hesitation, there's a lesson there. There's something to be learned from that person.
And how is it with charisma for women? Because usually I think about charisma when like I look around, and it's usually like always for guys, and like how can you go to someone and talk to someone? So it feels more like this masculine almost. What's your experience?
Yeah, I would agree that conventional charisma, as it's taught, is a more masculine trait, more masculine quality. I feel just with the clientele I've had, the students I've had over the years, women have a much better ability to be aware of emotions. They're much more emotionally intelligent than guys. Where they struggle with is connection. So where guys hang around with other guys, they kind of get on after a while, generally. Women don't. They usually have a lot of women who are not in a family experience will have quite a lonely experience. They lose their friends because their friends start settling down, having kids, and they find it hard to make actual friends, like non-bitchy friends, like the type of friendship that guys enjoy. So that's where they struggle. So for women, it's more connection. We could put it under the lens of charisma. So the more masculine teaching of charisma is teaching guys how to become more emotionally aware, which is what girls do great. Teaching women is more about focusing on how to be more interconnected and connected with people and building strong connections and friendships. which is something guys generally find easier. And you know, if you can struggle with both areas. People struggle with both areas, completely normal. But that's generally the trend. So yeah, women totally can have charisma. It is a more masculine trait though, because it's basically unrestrictedness, right? So if you think of the feminine, like expressing itself, dancing, these are all traits that the in femininity, like in the female form, and like a beautiful girl walks into a room, it evokes emotion in anyone anyway. Like it's like wow. So it's much more, I think, available. That's why I think it's less revered, from what I can tell.
Because they have the basics or one of the basic cornerstones like emotions, like
Yeah,
recognizing emotions. They have it
yeah,
more in them.
yeah. They're basically better than us, is what I'm trying to say. So they've got that by default. So they will generally they will have what guides are trying to learn. They already have that. I think it stands out less because it's just more widespread, in my opinion. Um, yeah. And by the way, like you can check
And
this.
yeah,
So notice when you're chatting to a girl, does she make you feel an emotion? When you're chatting to women, do they make you feel emotions? Like that's charisma. Charisma is the ability to make others feel emotion, as far as I'm concerned. My biased opinion, but that's generally how I would define it at a more macro abstract level. Is that person making me feel emotions? Are they expressing themselves readily?
so,
Like both men and women can do that.
so this is actually like a really good technique. Let's say, like imagine like the people that have their like the trackers, you know, that tell them how many
Hmm.
steps they've taken
Yeah,
a day.
yeah.
If you could always just tune in, like what's the level of emotion right now, this would help your charisma.
Yeah, that's social intelligence, like emotional intelligence. Like, what emotions are you sharing with somebody? Like, have you shared 3 emotions with them, 5 emotions? How deep are you sharing those emotions? How long have you shared those emotions for? Like, we've all met somebody who just has like one emotion. Maybe they are super excited, but they kind of become annoying to be around. If somebody doesn't have much emotional depth, they get annoying. If they have loads of emotions, that's interesting. But how profound, like, are they turned up? Is the volume strong? Or is it just quite shallow? Is it like there are loads of emotions, but it's very stifled? So all this kind of emotional awareness, something that could be learned, but yeah, not everyone. We don't all start the same way with emotions, depending on our upbringing, how much we played as a kid, what relationship we had with our parents. All sorts of things affect our emotional intelligence or ability to be emotionally aware, shall we say?
But we can tap really quickly into like emotions, and because when I came back after your course with my qigong class, we played some charisma games, and the energy was like crazy. They were like laughing, it was like hilarious, so the energy was so high. So I think it's really something that people are thirsting for, and the more everyone that's listening can cultivate that skill, you're really doing the world a service.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that goes back to going first. You know, you got to be the first person to do the skill, to express it, because then that makes it okay for everyone to express it. That's the gift you give by going first, by feeling the emotion you want others to feel. If I feel confident and I chat to somebody, they're more likely to feel confident. If I feel sad and I chat to somebody who's sad, they're more likely going to feel sad. So we go first. And then that allows, like you say, that unlocking. But it takes courage to go first.
Okay, and how's your book progressing?
Oh, it's terrible. Oh man, well, I just, I thought I'm going to make a list of jobs to do today. One of them is to work out this book. So it's awful. The trouble is, every time I start writing, I'm like, I can write so much, but what do I stick in? So I'm going to start from scratch again. I've written this book about 19 times, so I'm going to write it a 20th time, and because my goal is actually to leave out as much as possible and just focus on the key skills, the thing that's going to get you the most result. So this time in 6 months or next next year, I'll be like, "Hey, here's this great book." Yeah, it's long overdue. My very first student, I said to them, "I'm going to write a book," and he's like, "Okay, can you send that to me on email?" Like, I'm friends with this guy to this day. So he set his own coaching company up. Like he went down the rabbit hole with everything. He even became a coach. He set this famous company up. They were like working all over the world, training, helping people. And every time I see him, he's like, "Where's the book?" And then on New Year's, like I saw him at Christmas, and we're having a pint of beer. And he's like, you still didn't get that book. Like that book in like 17 years. He's waited for this book. So the book's on the way. The book's on the way. But the thing I like I tell everyone is, right, even without the book, you're your own best teacher. If you set the intention you want to get good at it, and you make the decision to hang around people who've got the attitude you want, and you ask yourself, why did they get that result? Why did that happen? What lesson could you learn from that? You'll start getting better anyway. Like, that's the secret. Books and programs speed it up, but you can still teach yourself. Right? There's people who are less bright than you who've worked this stuff out. Right? There's more out there who've got this stuff down. Yeah, it's one of them. So if they can do it, you can do it. Sometimes I think the problem, we worry about getting it right, getting it perfect. Every conversation I have, I screw up. Every single one. Mess up every single conversation. There's something I could have said better. There's something I forgot. I forgot someone's name, or I spat when I spoke to them, or I ran. It's just every conversation I have is not flawless. It's a mess, but I just keep going. Sort, as I said before in the past, you sort your parachute out on the way down, right? Most people try and pack this perfect parachute to the perfect interaction, and that's good for parachuting, but it's not good for moment by moment conversation, which is really a meditation in presence. You have to sort it out as you go down. Like if you're doing, was it fast hands or whatever it is, and yeah, you can't just work out all your moves ahead of time. You have to respond, react. That's the kung fu of it. But that's the
people are
attitude.
afraid of saying something stupid. How do you recoup from a faux pas in the conversation?
Yeah. But I think the thing to do is accept you're stupid. Like, I'm stupid. It's cool. I'll get on with it. It's a label. So we're afraid of the labels. And when we're afraid of the labels, then we're powerless, right? So I'm all the things, right? I'm an idiot. I'm stupid. I'm cool. I'm fun. I'm bored. Like, I make peace with those labels. Yes, I can be all of those labels. And is that all I am, or am I more? And is that all you are, or are you more? So yes, you could get thought of as stupid, but is that all you are? Just because one person in one moment picks that label up and sticks that, is that it? That's it. There you go. Go off. You get to take the label off, guy. You don't have to keep it. We worry because we don't think we can unpeel the label. We're like, this is it now. This is who I am. I have been labeled stupid. Therefore, I am stupid for the rest of my life. No. You have your belief is what picks the label off. Either, what I mean by that is, if you have two people and one of them believes one of them is stupid, like, I believe this. If the other person's belief is weaker than the person who's just stuck that label on them, they're whole. Oh, this must be right. That's bullshit. You have to strengthen your own belief. You have to believe in your awesomeness more than they believe in your stupidity. Your belief, if you believe if they believe you're stupid and you believe even more, then you're stuck that way. That's it. Why would you do that to yourself? Perhaps we've been conditioned to. So what I would invite you to do is to ask yourself, is this all I am, or am I more? Think about what other labels you have. And think about what labels you want to carry around. Because the labels are really sticky. Negative emotions are addictive, but they're not us. They're just labels. They're not your true self. So that's probably a more deeper answer to, I understand people are scared of, like, oh, I don't want to say this thing because I don't want to get the result. The answer is because of the attitude. The solution at a technique level might just be to think this would go well, this would be funny, but eventually it just becomes irrelevant. So we live in a time, I don't know if this house will go on for, but we live in a time of shame. It's like anything, like sticking on a negative label on somebody is like the act of shaming them. And it's like, be shameless, be unlabelable, then you'll be free. 0 fucks will be given. Pardon my French, but big deal. Still, so what? That's a nicer way of saying it, but big deal. So what? Yeah, big deal. You think I'm this? I'm much worse. That's how I move through life. If somebody says you can't say that, or you shouldn't say, I'm like, yeah, maybe. But if you think that of me, oh man, I'm much worse. Oh, thanks for thinking so highly of me in the first place. Like, I just have fun with it. I don't attach myself to their story. I'm always going to write my story. And my story, I want to be successful and I want to win and have a happy life. You too. Write that story. Your belief is such. You have that power.
I think, yeah, you're like, the last 5 minutes were like the perfect last words to people. And I think like something to really ponder deeply. And also, I hope people really take it to heart. Although it's like many words, I think there's a lot of like deep meaning in it, which can really improve the experience you have in your life.
Thank you. What I will say, just to add to that, if anyone gives you a negative label, it's because they're afraid of that label themselves. Your ability to actually hold that label is a compliment because you're showing, hey, you give me this label, I can hold it. They're afraid of that. That's why they're putting it your way. So just a little side bit there. It means you're not invisible. If you're getting labels in the first place, the worst thing that you could possibly be, I think, is invisible. It sounds like a superpower, but invisible is just like no one knows you exist. That's the worst result. If somebody calls me stupid, they know I exist. I know I exist. I know I'm making a dent in the universe by doing that. Doink, doink. It might be irritating someone, but I know I'm alive. If I'm just this invisible, what was the point of it all? Anyway, yeah.
Test out the new invisibility gear.
Yeah.
Okay, how can people reach you? If you want to, or I don't know, reach your website.
At the bottom of a cup of tea leaves, my name should appear. But if that doesn't work, they can reach me through, there's a website called yourcharismacoach.com. My personal email is Marcus with a C at yourcharismacoach.com. And there's a free ebook on my website as well called How to Talk to Anyone Without Fear of Rejection. And that's free, and that's on yourcharismacoach.com. If I owe them money, none of those, that email address won't work.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the website's down. Yeah. No worries. Thanks for having me on.
If you found this interview helpful, I'm sure you'll also find my other interview with Marcus really helpful. And you can find it on the screen here right now. Just click on it and I see you there. Bye.